My name is Nick Fleece, and I'm here with Principal Engineer Jeff Stangler, and we're going to walk you through today what comes in your printer box when you order an HDP6600 high-definition card printer. Now, you'll see, obviously, we've already taken the printer out of the box and initially plugged it in and powered it on just for this presentation, but I'd like to go over some of the things that are included with your printer. Obviously, you'll see here that we have the full print setup for this printer, which is the card printer itself, the flipper that enables dual-sided printing, and the lamination unit for maybe an extra layer of protection on those cards. Depending on how you order the printer or what modules you order, your configuration may look a little different, but as far as what comes in the box, that will be the same throughout. So other than the printer, the power cables, you will receive an input hopper that comes in the box. Thank you, Jeff. The next thing you'll receive is an output bin, which can be either connected directly to the laminator, the flipper, or the printer itself if you just have a single-sided unit. And you'll get some power cables. European cable. If you need it, yep. You'll get a printer USB cable that directly connects to your printer for driver installations and things like that. You will also get some warranty information about your printer. And the next thing you'll get is essentially a quick installation guide or a quick start guide to get you up and running, as quick as possible. So here in a few minutes, we're actually going to walk you through where to go to get the drivers, downloading the drivers, and some basic setup of the driver to ensure that you get quality prints out of the gate. So Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add or anything I might have left out?
Nope, I think it sounds good. Let's dive into it.
All right, so give me a few seconds here and we'll get some screen shared and we'll go through the driver. All right, so as you can see here, we already have hidglobal.com/drivers brought up. If you do need to download your drivers, please just visit www.hidglobal.com/drivers. We do have a nice little search bar here, so if you know the model of printer that you have, you can just type it in there, hit enter, and then scroll down, and depending on which operating system you're running, we have different drivers for you. So we're using Windows here, so I've downloaded Windows. It is important to note that once you install your drivers, it's important that you don't power on or connect your printer to your computer before you've downloaded and began the install of the driver. So during the installation process of the driver, it will tell you to hook up your printer via the USB cable that comes with it, and then you can commence the driver installation from there. In order to get to the driver, I usually go to printers and scanners. You can go to control panel as well. And then you'll just click on the driver instance that you have, go to manage, and then printing preferences. So once the driver opens, you'll notice we open to the basic setup screen. These are the options I'm primarily going to review today. I'm just going to review those through the advanced tab. But before we do that, there's another section of the driver that I'd like to point out. Most people don't really know about it, but it's the help section. And this actually has the user guide built into it. So it'll show you troubleshooting techniques, error codes. If you don't know what an error code means, it'll give you a brief description and potentially a solution to your problem. Another area that's often overlooked is we have video links here for how to convert laminator from one material to two, connecting the laminator to the printer, routine cleaning, ribbon calibrations, just a bunch of good information and videos here underneath the help section. So in going through these first few options for your basic setup, some of these are a little self-explanatory, but we're going to go through them anyway. The first one is going to be orientation, whether you want your image printed in landscape or portrait mode. The second option is going to be whether you want to print a single or dual-sided card. Now, obviously, if you buy the single-sided printer without the flipper, you probably won't be able to print a dual-sided card. But this gives you options. If you do have the printer with the flipper, you can differentiate whether you want to print a dual-sided card or a single-sided card. And the next option here is going to be card type. Now, this is going to be a very important option because the way this reverse transfer printer works is it has the ability to put a lot of heat into a card or into a piece of plastic. So depending on what type of card you actually have and the construction of that card, some of like a tech card, for example, we're not going to want to put as much heat into that because it's constructed a little differently than your standard PVC card or polycarbonate card. Now, for these card types, we have done extensive testing with HID cards and competitors' cards, and we've come up with 5 card types that we feel work with them a higher amount of cards. So they work with most cards on the market, but being that there are so many card manufacturers out there, you still may have to manually tweak these settings a little bit. But so for example, if we choose a HID tech card composite, you'll see that we automatically set your dwell time, your temperature offset, so how much temperature we're putting onto that transfer roller, and the dwell time is essentially how long that card is under heat with the image being transferred to it. Now, we highly recommend you use these defaults based on the selected card type, and we highly recommend that you use premium mode. Now, if you have the the latest driver, these options will be checked by default. So really all you will need to do is select the card type of the media that you're loading into the printer. In the event some of these preset settings don't work for your specific card type, you do have the ability to uncheck this box and manually move these sliders to achieve the quality that's desired. Jeff, did I miss anything there, or is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that was pretty good, Nick. I'll just stress that reverse transfer printers use a lot of heat. They fuse plastic, another layer of plastic to your card. And because there's literally hundreds and probably thousands of different cards out there, technology cards, and they're all made a little different. Some cards, we've tried to get the top 5 here that will work with most, but some cards may need different settings than what we have here, because when you transfer that much heat to a card, some handle it better, some handle it worse. And it's very dependent on how they manufacture that card. But the settings that are here, they'll work with most, those default settings you have will work with most cards on the market.
What are all those other settings that we see?
Yeah, so you will see quite a few more settings and sections in this driver. We will cover those in a lot more detail on our next webinar, specifically the 3rd webinar. We're going to do a much deeper dive into the driver and the capabilities of the driver, because you will notice with this HDP6600 printer, it is not compatible with Workbench, but essentially Workbench has been added into the driver. So all the functionality that you were used to in the old Fargo Workbench has been put into built into the 6600 driver. All right, so next we're going to switch cameras, and Jeff is going to walk us through some of the featured components in this printer and essentially the technology behind it, how it works, and just some different components. So bear with me for a minute while I switch cameras.
I'm basically going to go through, I have a printer here, and I just want to step through what some of the main features on the printer are. Sensors, rollers, print heads, all the hardware that goes into one of these, at least some of the main components, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, so that when I reference something later on, we'll all kind of know what that is. So first of all, I have the camera on my printer here, and first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the ribbon drawer. So I'm going to pull this guy out. Like that, and next, these TikTokers and YouTubers, they're good at this. I'm not. I'll apologize for being embarrassingly bad with maneuvering a camera right now. All right, did I get it in there? Looks.
It's good, it's
I
good.
think so. All right. So there's the ribbon drawer, and I'm just going to take out. Yeah, I'll take out the material here, just so we can see it a little better. So I've done that. There's a couple features in here that I want to show specifically. And they are, number one is the print head bracket. That's this black part. It's a little less than dark black, but this print head bracket is rigidly mounted between the metal side plates, so nothing moves there. And it holds a number of parts. Number one, I'll just say it, the print head. So the print head is down here. And the print head is mounted in there very specifically. It's very tightly controlled how it's mounted in there and how it's assembled. So if you do happen to move the print head sometime, if you're working on or servicing these things, it's almost impossible to get it back into place without some tooling coming from manufacturing. So just to let you know that. So this is the print line right here. You can see kind of where the green is. You probably shouldn't touch that like I just did, but I know how to clean my printer. I'll be okay. And then the other part here I'll look at is built into it, different from some of our others, is the peel-off bar of this printer. And with a reverse transfer printer, there's actually two peel-off bars. And a peel-off bar is essentially kind of what it sounds like. It separates two of something. So in this case, when you print, the film and the ribbon are stuck together until they get to this point. And at that point, the ribbon goes one way and the film goes the other way, and they peel off from each other. So here, the peel-off bar is built in. Next up, I'm going to just switch over to here. We have our ribbon sensor, and that's this thing right here. So our ribbon sensor, every sensor we have in here is basically, it has two parts to it. It has an LED part, and it has a receptor part. So this is sort of like someone has a flashlight, and there's someone else that's looking at it. So you have the light, and you have someone, the receiver for it. In this case, if we look at it, the receiver is permanently mounted to the print head bracket next to the print head. That's where the receiver is. Now the LEDs, and there's actually three of them on here. There's three LEDs because there's three colors basically to look at: yellow, magenta, and cyan. That is on this bracket, and if you notice it, this bracket can actually move. And the reason for that is when you install material, you won't wrap around that bracket. It's easier to install. But now if I push this ribbon drawer into the machine, this will automatically move forward. So if I just, I'm just put my material back in here. Let me back it up. We'll back it right up there. So at this point, if I pretend to push it in, the sensor would come back or would move. Now the LED is aligned up. It's aligned with the receiver. So what this would be doing at this point, let's say it's looking for the magenta color, because it has to line up the colors so it knows what it's printing. So at this point, it turns on a light. The LED that it turns on shines right through yellow. So it starts moving, keeps moving, and now when magenta comes through here, as soon as magenta comes through, the light that's shining through it, it can't shine through magenta. It's just, it's designed that it can make it through yellow, but not magenta. That way it knows, here's my transition point, and now it will move that transition point to the print head location. So now at this point, the ribbon drawer would be ready to print a magenta color.
Do those LEDs ever need to be replaced?
So it's pretty rare that you have to replace LEDs. But LEDs are, the one issue with LEDs is they will dim over time. So whether it's an LED in our sensor or it's an LED in the ceiling, over time they tend to dim, to get less bright. So there's nothing you can do with the ones that are in your ceiling. You replace them if they get dim, you know, over a year or two maybe. These, you can go in and calibrate them. So it will automatically put more power to it, so it will brighten them up to where they need to be.
Where do you calibrate those?
That is going to be back in the driver where Nick was showing. And I think we're going to hit that.
Yep, we will dive further into the driver on our third webinar. All the capabilities and testing that we have through the 6600 driver.
Mm-hmm. All right, did I hit everything with the ribbon drawer?
Yeah, I think you got everything.
Let's do that. I'll push that one closed. The next thing I want to look at is our film drawer. So let me just pull this one up and rotate things around here. And oh, I apologize. I hope some people have Dramamine because they're gonna probably need it by the time I get done. All right. Does that look pretty good? Okay.
Looks good.
All right. So here's the ribbon drawer. I'm gonna just, there's a lot of parts to this. I mean, there's half the parts in this machine are on the ribbon drawer, or on the film drawer. So I'm just gonna catch a few of the main ones. Number one, I'll just start on this side, is our print platen. That's this roller right here. So now, how a reverse transfer printer works is it transfers ink from the ribbon to the film. And how you do that is you squeeze the film and the ribbon together and squeeze them up against the print head. And then the print head fires and it transfers ink. So it uses this, at this point, this print platen moves when it's ready to print and squeezes the film and the ribbon together up against the print head.
And Jeff, for those who may not know, what is a platen?
Yep, so a platen is just a general term for any printing device, really. Whether it's an inkjet printer or something, whatever is underneath the material that you're trying to print to, it holds the material. It's generally called a platen. So if you had an inkjet printer, there's something holding the paper. A lot of times that's a platen plate or something like that. Here, since we're printing to film, it's a platen roller because that's what's moving. That's what's moving the film. So, yeah, if I throw out terms that are too technical,
We'll
well,
help you.
you just have to deal with it because that's who I am. So. No, I'll just ask. All right, so next up, I'll just move to the purple roller. That's this one right here. The purple roller, it's a very sticky roller, and we call it a drive roller, and that is actually what moves the film around. So if I grab this pulley over here, and I just move it back and forth, you can see the film moving. So that is what will actually move the film. So it's fairly critical that this roller remains somewhat sticky. And you do that by just keeping it clean. That's if it gets dirty, you're going to tend to see it's going to be like a wheel slipping on a car. It's going to slip on the film, and film's not going to be in the right spot, and you're going to get image quality issues and possibly other stuff. So it's very good to keep this roller fairly clean, and that's the drive roller. Next up, let me just take out the film real quick. We can see this next part. Try really hard not to drop this so it doesn't roll away. All right. Hold on, moving the camera again. All right. That looks okay. This black part that kind of makes an L shaped, this is a sensor. So this is what we call the print side sensor. So we kind of talk about print side and transfer side. Print side is the side to the right here. That's where it transfers ink to the film. And then over on the other side, on the left side, that is the transfer area. Transfer side, which transfers that the image that you have printed onto the film, it transfers the film to the card. So we often refer to it as print side on the right side, transfer side on the left. This particular sensor is it's called our print side film sensor. Now, if you remember, every sensor, there's really two parts to it. There's an LED and there's a receiver. This sensor actually has two sensors built into it. So it has a transmissive sensor, a through sensor. So you can see that there's an LED light right where I have my finger, and that shines up to a receiver that is in this top part. We also have, in this same housing, a reflective sensor. Reflective sensor is a little bit different in that the LED and the receiver are right next to each other, and it's designed to shine light up, and when something goes by that reflects that light, the receiver sees it, so it knows if something's going by. You know, it's a little different. This transmissive is through, you have to have it on each side. This one is reflective. Let me just throw my material back in here. All right, let me back this up a little bit. All right, still see, looks like it. Looks good. So in this case, you can see where the sensor is, and you can see where the white mark is. So as this printer moves the film, the white mark moves, and the sensor, the reflective sensor, is turned on, and it's looking for that mark. And eventually you get to a spot where it is over the reflective sensor. The reflective sensor sees it and says, turn on the transmissive sensor. Transmissive sensor now has LED on the bottom, receiver on the top, and it will accurately place that film mark. And transmissive sensors are very accurate. I mean, they can place things to a couple thousandths of an inch. We use the combination of the transmissive and the reflective because a reflective sensor is very good at seeing white marks and nothing else, but they're not too accurate. They just know it's somewhere in the area. Transmissive sensor accurately places it. So we actually use two different sensors here in combination to find the marks and know where the film is. Next thing I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go over to the transfer side. And hang on again. Oh, I think I'm getting better at this.
Smooth.
All right, is that smooth? Yeah. So you can see, here's my film coming over it. This point right here, there's an orange roller in there. That orange roller is the transfer roller. So when we talk about transferring, there's an image that got printed onto the film, and it is going to take a lot of heat. That's how retransfer printers work. A lot of heat, squeeze this film to the card, and essentially transfer part of this film onto the card. And it's hot enough that it actually, essentially, it's like an iron. That thin layer of plastic that comes off this film is now part of the card.
Can that ever get too hot?
It can. So this printer has a lot of power because it's kind of built for speed. So there's certain cards, a lot of our tech cards that you see in the field, they are made of layers and layers of plastic. So some of them, instead of transferring the film to the card will actually, because of the heat that you have, some of the layers in the card will actually transfer to the film. And that's where we call it card delamination. And the card kind of comes apart and bad things happen.
Are we gonna talk more about the lamination?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Bill. That's something we will dive further into in our second webinar. So we'll get more into card delamination and troubleshooting a few common issues that we've seen in the field.
Right. And card delamination is relatively easy to fix. You just have to know how and what you're seeing and why it's happening. So here is another sensor. This sensor looks just like the sensor that was on the print side. This is our transfer side sensor. And if you look at it, it would do the same thing. As it moves the material, it would see the mark, it's going to stop. And if you notice, your transfer roller is now basically right where it needs to be to start transferring the card. And I'll just, let me find a card here real quick. And that's not too dirty. Yeah, it's dirty. But your card is going to come in, move to this position, right here, right above that roller. And that's where your hot roller will engage. It'll squeeze everything together, and it will start moving both the card and the film. They're essentially glued together at this point because of the heat that you put into it. Once it gets to this point, this is a peel-off bar that is designed to peel off the film from the card. So as it keeps on moving, try not to move the card, as it keeps on moving, the card goes one way and the film goes another. But part of this film is now sealed onto the card, and it's actually sort of one with the card. So, and that is how you would transfer, that's how it transfers that image to the card. So I'll just, let's see, I think that's how it works for transferring. I think one thing I'll just show you is this has an accumulator with it. The camera again. All right, the accumulator is right here. An accumulator is basically, it has just some spring-loaded rollers in. And what they do is, if I can just put this down part ways, as I move the film, it will go and either go into or out of the accumulator. And I have a video that kind of shows this a little better, but the accumulator basically just accumulates film. It takes it in, it puts it out, it's just spring loaded, but it allows this system to drive, and it can separate the print side and the transfer side from each other.
So since the two sides are separated from one another via the film accumulator, is it possible to print to the film while you're transferring? Can we do that simultaneously?
Right, you can, and that's exactly what it's designed for. I mean, this printer is designed for speed. If you have large batches of cards, it can run much faster than any other printer in the market right now because of this accumulator. Because while it's printing to the film, it can also be transferring to the card.
Wow, nice.
So let's take I have a video. So what I've done here is, this is just a quick video of the insides where you can see somehow some of the process that it's going through when it prints. Now I've bypassed a bunch of sensors and did some other stuff you probably shouldn't do to printers. So don't try this yourself, because it takes a little work to get this working. But this will show basically how a reverse transfer printer works. Print is warming just right now. And I just have a two-sided card job sent to this. So if you notice, it is printing side one of the card. So it is printing from the ribbon and it is printing to the film. So every time it does a color, it backs up. So it prints magenta, prints yellow, it backs up, prints magenta, backs up, prints cyan, backs up, and then it prints K. Now, if you noticed here, instead of going and transferring that image that it just printed to film, it's just going on and printing the next side. And by printing again, it's transferring, it's printing to the film. So you can see side one, it's fully printed, yellow, magenta, cyan, and K panel. And now it is going to print side two. So you can see printed magenta, that's going to back up, it's going to print cyan, it's going to back up again, it's going to print K panel. So
What's the K panel?
Oh, sure. So K panel, so you think about the colors, yellow, magenta, cyan. With those three colors, you can print any color in the spectrum. So that's how you can get your image, and you can get pictures to be printed by using those three colors. You can even print black that way. But if you're going to print, let's say, barcodes or text or something that's black that you really want to be stand out, we add what we call K panel in here. And that prints black. It is just specifically black, and it's a very dark black. If you print using yellow, magenta, cyan, you'll get a black color, but it won't be as black and as crisp as if you just print black.
Oh.
So it's really made for barcodes and text, I'll say.
Great.
Okay, so here we have, it's printed to the film, and now it is going to transfer that image to the card. So it's transferring side one right now. And I'm just going to stop it right here because I always think this is interesting because you can see the word test. So this is the second panel, but if you notice test is backwards. How these printers work is they print to the film and everything is reversed. But when it transfers that image to the card, it's going to be the right side. It's going to be, it will say test correctly. So that is kind of one of the reasons that it's called a reverse transfer printer, is because it does sort of print in reverse and then it transfers that image. And it printed this ink on this side of the film. So when it transfers that you will actually have the card, you'll have the printed ink image, and then you will have the film, the part of the film, that the plastic that actually transferred to the card. So reverse transfer printers give you very good wear properties because you actually have a layer of plastic between where you can touch and where the actual ink is on the card. So you'd have to wear through that to actually wear it out. So transferred side one, flip the card, now it's going to come back, it's going to align it, and transfer side two. And that gives you a completed card. I am going to go through this one more time. There's a couple of things I want to point out here that are interesting. I had talked about the ribbon sensor and how that works. So you'll be able to see here a little light go on down here. That's the LED from the ribbon sensor. And it's going to align the ribbon with the print head. It's not aligned correctly right now. So when that happens, you'll see the light come on, and it's going to very quickly actually align the ribbon. So there, a light came on, it aligned it, and now it's back printing yellow, back it up. And one other thing I'll just point out here is when I showed the accumulator before, With that, it can transfer and print separately. So if you notice this mark over here, the film is not moving on this side. But if I go to this side, the right side, this mark is moving back and forth where it's printing. And that's what the accumulator allows you to do, is separate those two out. So if you sent a batch of cards, 10 cards to this, while it's printing, let's say card number 4 to the film, it can be transferring card number 1. Then it'll transfer card 2 and print 5, transfer card 3, print 6. So it's doing it at the same time, which makes it incredibly fast when you start doing batches of cards. The other thing you can kind of see is the platened roller. It's difficult to see, but every time a film backs up, the platened roller will move to a home position, so it's not squeezing everything together. That's how it can move everything around. And then it moves everything to the transfer side and finishes this up. Transfer side 1, just going to flip the card. And again, transfer side 2. So that is essentially how these printers work. This is
Great.
The fundamentals of how these work. So
Thank you, Jeff. So what we're going to do now is we are going to open this up to our Q&A. We'll focus on our computer that's in front of the room. We're going to share a camera here. And then in the bottom right of your screen, you've got that Q&A window. If you want to bring that up now. And we can pop that out of the screen. So if you have any questions, please, now is the time to start asking them. So the first question here, what do you do when a card's stuck in the printer?
Okay.
so I can answer that. So there's a couple things that you can do. So this printer is fairly easily accessible. The card path is. So if you have a card that gets jammed in there, and because this printer uses so much heat, it will actually, it can melt cards, it can make them bow, and sometimes those will jam in here, or it'll just melt everything together, and that can become a real problem. We call that delamination, because it throws enough heat into the card that instead of the film transferring to the card, part of the card actually transfers to the film, and then it's bad things happen. It just can't transfer at that point. So if you see this, you can access both the flipper and the printer from the top. And if you have a card in there, let me just put a card in there. There's a couple different things you can do. 2 options you have. You can, when you open the door, you can push the buttons left and right, and that basically drives the card forward and back in the card path. The other thing you can do is, since you have good access to the card path, you can also either get in here with tools, or I can just take one of the rollers and I can manually rotate the roller with my fingers. That sometimes works just the best. But you can get the card in and out of the card path reasonably easy with this type of system, because there is so much access to it.
Can card jams also be resolved by restarting your printer?
Yeah, quite often. So the first thing when you power the printer on, it does look for cards in the card path, and if it finds them, it tries to eject them.
Okay.
Now, if they're stuck there because they're so warped from the heat or something like that, then you might have to manually go do it. But yes, a reboot does fix a lot of things.
And we have another question coming in asking, hi, how can we clean the purple roller and with what? So yeah, that's a great question. Actually, every time you order a roll of film, you should get, or you will get a small isopropyl alcohol wipe that comes with that film roll. And actually what can be done through the printer LCD screen, you'll go to Toolbox and you can actually go down to clean the film drive roller. And what's going to happen next is the printer, the LCD screen of the printer is going to ask you to pull out the film drawer, take out the film. Once you take out the film, you'll have a check mark you can hit, and that'll actually start driving that purple roller. And since the film's out, it's not going to be driving anything. The roller's just going to be spinning. And at that point, you would take that isopropyl alcohol cloth and clean that purple roller. Now, it'll probably spin for about 15 to 20 seconds. And then it'll give you the option to do it again. So you can hit the check mark again, and it'll continue to spin that roller as you wipe it with that alcohol wipe. There's another question that asks, so are most of the tools from Workbench, are they directly in the driver now?
Yeah, so for the HDP6600, there is no more Workbench. Pretty much everything that was in the Workbench is now moved into the driver.
Yep, and we will be reviewing that in more detail on our third webinar. Another question is, I guess, if there are a lot of sensors in the printer/lam unit, is there a utility option on the driver to check the available sensors if they are defective or functional? And you know, that's actually a great question.
Yep, and the answer is yes. So there is in the utilities in the driver, there is a place where you can monitor every sensor in this thing. And you can cover them up and you can watch them in real time, change.
Yeah, and we will definitely be sure to review that feature on our third webinar when we take a closer look at the driver.
Right, but it is in the utilities. You can just, if you've seen them before, you can usually just go and find it, and it's not too hard to figure it out.
Another question we have is, do we have a silent installation package for deploying the drivers in a corporate environment?
I have no idea.
Yeah, so we'll have to get you an answer. That's a great question. Another question just came in. What causes it to overheat?
Right, so there is no, I won't say it overheats because in the driver, it sets the temperature of what it wants to transfer at and what temperature you want it to run at. So it really, I wouldn't say overheat. It can have too much heat for a specific card, but there's no correct heat level. It depends on your card, and you really have to, if you have a third-party card or someone else's card, we only have 5 on the list, so there's a few missing. And if you have one of those, you really just have to possibly change the temperatures to get it to work properly on that card.
Can you store temperature presets for various cards? So I'm assuming that means if you load multiple cards into the hopper, or we do have 5 card presets in the driver. We reviewed those.
I don't believe there's a way to store a custom setting in here for a specific card. I'd have to check on that for sure, but I don't think there's a way of doing that.
How about this one, Nick? Is there a document showing all error codes and what they mean?
Yeah, so actually in that help section of the driver that we reviewed at the beginning of this webinar, there is a user guide in there, and in one of those sections it will show you all of the listed error codes and a brief description of that error.
I believe that's on the HID global site too, right?
Correct.
That technical document. Yeah.
Yep, that is correct. All right, and we have a question. Yeah, so we asked, do we provide tech support? Yes, we do provide tech support to our partners. The short answer to that would be yes, we do provide tech support.
We have a staff that is trained on the printers that you can call and talk to.
Can we clone the configuration for more than one printer?
I'm not completely sure what that means, but there is a way of, if you have your settings, that you set everything up in the driver, you can save those settings to a file, and then you could take that file to any other computer and load those settings up. So that the driver settings that you were showing there at the beginning, Nick, you could have a file that, so you could basically duplicate that on as many computers as you wanted. So you could match those driver settings from one to another.
So we had another question come in stating, what would you do if a card is melted and stuck, and how would we get it out?
So typically when you see them when they're melted and stuck, that's because of a card delamination. Instead of the film transferring to the card, now part of the card body has transferred itself to the film, and they've essentially glued themselves together. So typically what you do there is you will open up the top hatch like I showed before, open up the door, and you can run the card backwards, and that will usually clear the card out. If it doesn't, a lot of times you can just take a tool or your finger and just while it's running, help push the card away. But what you want to do is push the card away from the film, usually backwards into the printer towards the input, and that will tear the card away from the film. But what you're seeing there, if that happens, is a card delamination where the card has come apart and is now sticking to the film.
So what happens, we have another question come in, what happens when we see a white line on the leading edge? Typically that means you may want to look at adjusting the top of form setting. It may be set too far. That would be the first place we would look in the advanced settings of the driver. Jeff, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, typically if you see lines at the leading edge of the card, it's when it's lining up the card to transfer, it's not in the, I'll say, the ideal spot to transfer. So you can adjust that and generally get that to be much, much better.
And we had one more question roll through. So when the transfer is heating up, is there a way to show the current temperature on the display rather than a percentage?
No.
No. Short answer.
My answer, no, we took that off, so it just shows a percentage rather than a number. And I don't know if there's a preference. I would certainly talk to your sales or marketing people. I mean, that was just that was when we launched the product that customers had requested, I guess.
Another option is what happens when you get an incomplete film transfer, or why does that happen?
So there could be a number of reasons for that. Again, it could be a card delamination where it can't completely transfer because the card body is starting to come apart. There's also your transfer top of form can be incorrect. Potentially, if your card does not make it to the transfer roller, it's too far back, either because rollers are dirty and it's not moving it there, or it's just set incorrectly. Either one of those can cause you to have, they'll basically look like it didn't transfer the last third or half the card. It varies, but it can be clean the printer, change the transfer, top of form, and change temperatures.
Another question just came in. It says, when there is a card jam and you do restart the printer, does it reprint the job on cue or does it delete everything?
So this printer has internal memory in it. So when you send a job from your computer, it doesn't start the job until that entire job is into the internal memory, and it can take several jobs. So if there's a job in the printer memory, or there could be 5 jobs, depending on how many you sent it, when you shut off the power, those all are gone. It clears out that memory, partly for security purposes, because you don't want information on the memory, but it does, if there is a job in the memory, if it is partially printed or not even printed, you turn the power off and it will clear out that memory, and those are gone.
Yeah, and so we have a comment in here that says, we have 2 to 3 printers with an alignment issue. I do know if, first things first, make sure you downloaded the latest firmware and install the latest firmware and driver for your printer. We do have a few new settings actually in the driver to help with registration issues. I believe one is called the yellow panel edge alignment and one is the magenta panel edge alignment.
Right, so we do have a setting in there to help with registration. And that is, it's similar to what you'd see in, let's say, an inkjet printer, where you can change the different colors where they're printing. So you can go in, if yellow is not aligned, you could go in there and shift yellow to make it match the other colors. And that is, you need a later version of firmware. So it's you may want to check that to make sure you have the latest version of firmware. But there is a setting now, and they're in the advanced settings that will allow you to adjust registration if it's not good enough for you.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for showing up today. This was really great. We have people from all over the world on this, and this webinar has been recorded. We will have these available on HID Academy. The next 2 webinars that we're doing, right, they are posted on Academy. You can enroll in those, and they will dive much deeper into troubleshooting and driver configuration. Be sure to enroll in those webinars. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. We will get a report on all these questions that we couldn't answer. We'll forward them to the right person, and we'll send you some direct emails. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. See you in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.